Sears didn't die because of Amazon. It didn't die because of a recession or bad luck or a missed deal. Sears died because its own CEO turned every department inside the company into a separate business, competing against each other for money and survival, inside the same stores under the same name. Picture a basketball team where a hedge fund manager buys the franchise and decides each player's salary should be based only on the points they personally score. Not team wins, not assists, just individual stats. You'd expect exactly what actually happened at Sears. Players stop passing the ball. Nobody wants to set up a teammate for an easy shot if it doesn't count toward their own number. The team starts losing badly, even though every single player is trying as hard as they can for themselves. That wasn't a hypothetical at Sears. That was the actual management plan. The hedge fund takeover. In 2005, hedge fund manager Eddie Lampert engineered a $12 billion merger between Kmart, which he already controlled after steering it out of its own bankruptcy, and Sears, at the time a struggling but far from dying department store chain. Lampert had made his fortune running ESL Investments, and he'd built a reputation as one of the sharpest minds on Wall Street. Some called him the next Warren Buffett. The new company, Sears Holdings, made him one of the most closely watched executives in America, and investors expected his financial instincts to do for a 120-year-old retailer what they'd done for his hedge fund. He didn't run Sears like a retailer. He ran it like a stock portfolio, dozens of businesses under one roof, each one expected to justify its own existence, competing for his attention and his money. 30 companies wearing one name. In 2008, Lampert took that portfolio mindset to its logical extreme. He split Sears into more than 30 separate internal units: appliances, tools, apparel, real estate, marketing, human resources, even IT, and gave each one its own president, its own board, and its own profit and loss statement. Lampert was an outspoken admirer of Ayn Rand and her philosophy of rational self-interest, known as objectivism, and he believed that if every unit inside Sears acted purely in its own self-interest, competing hard against each other, the company as a whole would come out ahead. If a division wanted help from human resources or the IT department, it had to negotiate a contract and pay for it, or go find a cheaper option outside the company entirely. Divisions weren't colleagues anymore. They were internal customers and vendors, billing each other, and every single one of them was being measured on their own bottom line, not on whether Sears as a whole was winning. Every division for itself. Here's what that actually looked like on the ground. Sears' appliance division discovered it could make more money selling Samsung and other outside brands than selling Sears' own trusted Kenmore appliances because of how the internal pricing worked. So the appliance division started giving better shelf space and bigger displays to their outside competitors over their own in-house brand. Sears was quietly outcompeting itself in its own stores. The tool brand, Craftsman, refused to pay extra internal fees to the battery brand DieHard. So the two literally stopped promoting each other. Two products that had shared a Sears aisle for decades, now acting like strangers. Divisions competed for space in the same advertising circulars, and whichever division paid the most internally won the placement, regardless of what actually made sense. One Mother's Day, circular ended up featuring a boy's mini bike on the cover because that division had outbid the others, not because anyone thought that was the smart way to sell Mother's Day gifts. No single division wanted to offer a discount to bring shoppers into the store either, the kind of loss leader pricing that had brought people through Sears doors for generations. A cheap, heavily discounted item near the entrance costs one division money on paper, even if it fills the whole store with customers who end up buying from every other department. Under the new system, that trade-off made no sense to any single division. So nobody did it. Cooperation had no accounting line. Only individual performance did. While the building burned. The human cost inside Sears headquarters was just as real as the strategic one. Employees described a workplace consumed by internal turf wars, where colleagues undercut each other because their bonuses depended on it. In 2012, Sears Holdings was ranked the 6th worst place to work in America. That same year, Lampert closed 1,200 stores and laid off tens of thousands of workers, and bought himself a $40 million home in Florida. Even Lampert's own communication style reflected the culture he'd built. Reports at the time described him posting under a fake name on the company's internal social network, sparring anonymously with employees rather than leading them directly. When a company spokesperson was later asked to defend the infighting, he told a reporter that the clashes for resources were simply healthy competition, the kind of thing, in his words, sorely lacking in socialist economies. A retail company that once defined middle-class American shopping was, by its own spokesman's account, worried about becoming too cooperative. Was it really the structure? Here's a fair objection. Department stores were struggling everywhere in this era. Amazon was rising fast. Malls were emptying out. Maybe Sears was simply a dinosaur that Eddie Lampert's strategy didn't kill. It just failed to save. There's real truth in that. But the timing and the comparison to its peers tell a sharper story. Sears' revenue dropped nearly 40% in the years after the internal competition model took hold, a far steeper collapse than most of its department store peers experienced over the same stretch. Walmart, facing the exact same rise of Amazon and the same shift away from malls, kept every part of its business coordinated under one strategy instead of pitting departments against each other, and kept growing while Sears collapsed. Competing retailers dealing with identical external pressures didn't restructure themselves into 30 warring internal companies. Sears did that to itself, on top of everything the market was already throwing at it. What's left? Sears filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in October 2018, with debts it could no longer manage, and a brand that had spent a decade fighting itself instead of its competitors. In the years around the bankruptcy, the company sold off Craftsman to Stanley Black & Decker, sold DieHard to Advance Auto Parts, and sold Land's End entirely. The same internal brands that had once refused to cooperate with each other, piece by piece, just to raise cash. Eddie Lampert's own investment firm then bought what remained of Sears out of bankruptcy for close to $5 billion, keeping the lights on in a shrinking handful of stores under a new holding company. Today, Sears operates only a handful of stores in the entire country, down from more than 3,500 locations at its peak between Sears and Kmart combined, back when the two chains together employed hundreds of thousands of people. The divisions that once refused to help each other are now, in most cases, simply gone. There was nothing left to compete over. The lesson. Competition isn't the villain of this story. Every company on this channel operates inside a competitive market, and most of them do it just fine. The villain here is more specific. The belief that competition works just as well inside a company as it does between companies. That if you make every department fight for itself, the whole organization automatically gets stronger. It doesn't. A company isn't a marketplace of strangers. It's a team that already agreed to share a name, a building, and a customer. The moment you make every department treat every other department like a competitor, you haven't created healthy competition. You've just given everyone a reason not to pass the ball. Next time, a beloved company that also let itself get pulled in a dozen directions at once, chasing theme parks, clothing lines, and video games until it nearly disappeared entirely. Unlike this one, somebody caught it in time and saved it by going back to the one thing it always did best: Subscribe if you want to see the pattern before it repeats.